Because the institution now becomes glorified. All our trust was placed in the institution. We put our trust in man and not the God of the man whom he's working through to bring about this healing to us. You know, these things can happen subtly. I don't think we go there with any intent to do that, but sometimes there's so much hope that is lost. Everyone may have tried this, we may have tried that, we may have tried all these other things. And so, once again, it's easy to do this, but that's why we have to daily make sure that we're keeping ourselves connected with God by way of studying, by way of surrendering our will to Him. There's so many verses that can encourage us. I'm just choosing the ones that stand out in my mind when I can remember dealing with certain issues, personal issues, and so on and so forth. When I would read these, sometimes immediately when you read them, they don't become necessarily real to you, but you may have to go back and read it again, and read it again, and read it again. But all you're doing at that point is sitting down saying, Lord, I don't understand, or it's just not coming to you. Unbeknownst sometimes to ourselves, when we go back and continue like that, we're holding on almost like Jacob, not letting go until the Lord has blessed us. So there's nothing wrong with saying, Lord, I don't understand, or Lord, why? Lord, this, that, and the other. The problem comes when we start doubting who He is and the power that He has. Because at that point, we're teetering on failing to recognize Him as the Creator God. We can say why, because we don't understand the ways of God. He tells us His ways are not our ways, nor His thoughts our thoughts. So right there, we don't understand His ways, but yet we're to trust Him. And you know, I think it's so important that we look at this whole issue of trust, because you know what, we have our issues and problems in everyday life, but these are pretty much relatively mild times. Wouldn't you all say? I mean, granted, there are people who harass you, they're just the stressors of life, but yet we're not being threatened in a religious liberty sense. We can come out, we can sit in here and worship, but we don't have to worry about anyone coming in saying, you know, unless you deny this God you're talking about, they're going to do this, that, and the other to us. We don't have to worry about those things. So our times are relatively mild right now. But Psalms 37, 23 through 29, it says, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. And it goes on to say, I have been young, and now am old. Yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. All of these things merely from a true faith and trusting relationship with our God. Now, how do we test even ourselves and everything else that's out there in terms of things that can try to mimic God's laws of health that we will find ourselves drifting to? I think we all know this text by heart. Isaiah 8:20, to the law and to the testimony. If they speak not according to these things, it is because there's no light in them. There's no light in them. Now you can take that word light and we can do a lot of things with that. Jesus himself says, I am the light of the world. So what that is telling me that Christ is not a part of these things. Now, will there sometimes be some healing in these? Let's just take nutrition. Now, we have been told those foods should be chosen that best supply the elements needed for building up the body. And this is found in Pathways, page 95. Pathways, page 95. It says, in order to know what are the best foods, we must study God's plan for man's diet, or original diet. Now, going back to Genesis 1:29, it said, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. to you it shall be for meat. So God has laid out the foods that he's given us. And we're told in pathways, once again, grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. These foods, prepared in as simple manner as possible, are the most healthful and nourishing. And key in on these words here. They impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. And you know, when you read that and you listen at those words, that's merely stating, think about Daniel in Daniel chapter 1. Let's go to that as a matter of fact. Daniel chapter 1. I'm going to skip some of the verses because you really want to read the whole thing, but just to get the full gist of what's being said here. First of all, there had to be a commitment from Daniel. All right? It says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now let's go to verse 12. It says, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse or vegetables to eat, and water to drink. Verse 15, at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Verse 17, as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge, the vigor of intellect that we read, knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Finally, verse 20, and in all matters of wisdom, once again, and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his realm. And from what? Them, first of all, being faithful to their God, trusting in him. Secondly, following God's diet for them. And they achieved not only physical well-being, but also mental and even spiritual as well. Now, can you imagine the time that they were there in Babylon? That one test, the very first test that came to them. If they had just said, well, you know, I don't think this little bit is going to matter quite that much. Of course, the Lord understands, doesn't he? I mean, we oftentimes hear that. Versus trusting in what had been laid before them all along, and now came their test. And see, that's what this whole issue sometimes of trust is about, for some things far down the line that we cannot see. And this was Daniel's, I wouldn't say it was a dilemma. It wasn't a dilemma by any means, because he had already put in his mind and purposed in his heart that no matter what, he was going to trust God. But not only that, he was going to make evidence his trust in God by following the simple diet and lifestyle that God had given him. And thus it is, God rewards him for that. Now, why then do sometimes when it comes down to healing, there are a lot of fasts out there. Some drift and put more of their trust in, say, this fad, raw foodism or raw food diets. Have we been instructed of such? No. Let's go back to Pathways again, to inspiration. It says, this is Pathways, page 97. And you've heard us talk about this a lot, but I want to put it in a practical sense when you're sitting down and you're talking to someone. It says, grains used for porridge or mush should have several hours cooking. Pathways, page 97. And she goes on to talk even more about cooking, but yet some of us have drifted into the thought and the mindset that we have to go on a raw food diet to promote or have optimum health, versus trusting what God has given us through his servant, through inspiration, but also through his word as well. Pathways, page 98, it says, scantily ill-cooked food depraves the blood by weakening the blood-making organs. It deranges the system and brings on disease. Now, wait a minute. Ill-cooked food, or sometimes you can even put in that category once again, raw food, scantily cooked, bringing on disease. Now, I will stop and say there are some instances where raw has its place, but in your daily eating, we have what for lunch? We have a salad, that's raw. In the morning, when you have your breakfast, you have your fruit, that's raw. If you do nuts like we do, you have your nuts, that's raw. And if for breakfast you're having at least three servings of fruit, that's a lot of raw. And when you do your lunch, if you have a big salad or a medium-sized salad, isn't that kind of a lot of raw too? So God helps us to create a good balance there. And you want to know something? It is because some of our foods are better for us raw. Some of them are much better for us cooked. So God strikes a good balance there for us. And besides this, we do not have the bodies that Adam and Eve had when there was no sin. So I wonder if God is helping us out by allowing us to cook some of these items to help break down, or those items are now releasing certain minerals, certain vitamins as well. But I will say this, it depends on your cooking method too. When you boil your items as well and discard the liquid that's left, sometimes there could be a lot of your minerals and vegetables and vitamins, thank you, you're pouring down the drain.
What if we steam it?
That's the point I was going to get to. She asked, what if we steam it? When you steam it, you shouldn't steam it for much more than maybe 15 minutes. And if it's broccoli, I would say 5. It just depends on the item that you're steaming, because broccoli doesn't take that long to cook. But the whole thing, as we see, like say for instance your carrots, and we talked about this maybe last week, I think, carrots and beta-carotene. When they're cooked, it releases more, there's a greater bioavailability there, which means that there's more of that particular nutrient available for the body to absorb. So you have your tomatoes as well, you cook those. More lycopene is made available for the body to absorb as well. Your corn, when you cook that, more of a particular acid in the corn that has cancer-fighting agents in it, that's released as well. And the list goes on for a couple of other items as well. Even sometimes it's good, as the studies are now showing, that we also cook the items like the broccoli as well. Even for those who are sick, we're told that the food prepared for our sick needs to be actually cooked. There's a place for raw in there as well, because there's a protocol that they use at UC Pines actually for some of their patients, their cancer patients, where they juice the stalk of the broccoli and so forth and get a concentration of, I think it's a chemical called sulforaphane, which has cancer-fighting agents. It's loaded with cancer-fighting agents. So there's a place for raw, but raw is not the full or the sum total in terms of maintaining health. Now, it goes on to say in Pathways again, and I'm just giving all these quotes because she talks so much about cooking, more than I thought. It said, it is a sacred duty for those who cook to learn how to prepare healthy food. Pathways, page 98. It says, cooking is no mean science. It is one of the most essential, notice these words, most essential in practical life. It goes on here, Pathways, page 98 again. Every woman who is at the head of a family and yet does not understand the art of healthful cookery should determine to learn that which is so essential to the well-being of her household. But man, don't think she's going to let us off, because she didn't. It goes on, Pathways, page 104. All should learn what to eat and how to cook, and how to cook it. Men as well as women need to understand the simple, healthful preparation of food. Oh, wow, I only heard one amen, and there you go. Amen. I heard a second to that. Now I'm going to go, here's some of the dangers of when we step outside the trust